I'm not going to ask people to introduce themselves. It's just an opportunity for us to, for me to share some information. And okay, cool. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm Lene Willis. I'm licensed in Maryland, West Virginia, and Ohio. I currently reside in Cleveland, Ohio. Hi, Sherry. How are you? And I've been working with individuals and couples to help them with processing anxiety, depression, marital issues, or just relationship issues altogether, parenting issues as well. So there's been a lot a lot of work that I've been doing. Oh, also trauma. That's one of the main specialties that I work on. And I've been working in the field for, dare I say, almost 20 years. So I'm kind of old, even though I may not look it. Hi, Jamar. How are you?
Hey, how are you? I
Good.
was trying to log on via another laptop, but I had an issue, so I just came this way.
Okay. No worries. It's all good. Jumar and Shari, they're here to dialogue, have conversations about sex, love, and lies in regards to relationship issues. So I'm just excited that they both can be here. I know Jumar does not necessarily want an introduction, but I'll introduce Shari if she's okay with that. This is
I can introduce myself too. Yeah, you can go ahead. You can introduce me if you like.
Okay. So Jumar is my IT guy. He does everything for me as far as business goes with video recording and things of that nature. So he could probably help me better with this setup, which is not great, but I'm a therapist. That is not my skills. I will not profess it as one. But Jamar, he has a company. His name is called, or the company's name is Launch Arts Inc., I think.
Launch Arts Media.
Yep. Launch Arts Media.
Mm-hmm.
He also did a lot of my, well, he did all of my professional pictures, things like that I have on my website. So thank you so much, Jamar, for being here and being adding a male's perspective on this conversation. I'm very excited for your input. I know that this is going to be a good conversation. And Shari Loveday is also a licensed therapist. She resides in Maryland, licensed in Maryland as well. And she works with couples primarily and individuals, I believe, as well, but primarily couples, similar interests, anxiety, depression, some trauma issues. Do you also see? Great. So I'm happy to get your input. She has a podcast called Live Well. I love
Black Girl Love Well.
Black Girl Love Well. So I appreciate all of the goodness that she has to share here today. Oh, Jumar and Shari, they're both married, not necessarily saying that you have to be married to be a part of the conversation. Everyone has relationships, and I think any input is valuable input and experience. So I thank you both for being present, and we're just going to go ahead and dive into it unless you guys have something you want to say about services that you provide or anything like that.
I just want to say that if y'all really love Lene, she's on the podcast for the next 2 weeks. So the podcast episode that aired on Friday and the one that'll air this Friday. And we just had a great time. So it's definitely a good one.
That was a great conversation.
I definitely checked that out. And I just wanted to add to, continuing my introduction. We definitely love engaging conversations like this. So, props to Lene. She was featured in a women's discussion panel just about women in business that we put on. So I'm happy just to see all of these entities come together or, steamroll and get going in terms of having great conversations that push all sorts of, different aspects of life forward.
Great. Thank you so much, you both, for adding some additional content. So let's go ahead and dive into it. We're talking today about sex, love, and lies in relationships, marriages, any kind of dating relationships. And I just kind of want to get a sense from you all, when you think about sex and you think about love, how would you all define either? I can start. So for sex, when I think about sex, I think of, and this is an adult conversation. So if you have kids, put them somewhere. So sex, when we think about sex, or when I think about sex, there's oral, there's anal, there's vaginal. Look at Jamar's eyes. His eyes won't. So we're having candid conversations. We're adult. We're allowed to have these conversations. So we're going to get into it. And as far as sex goes, it's just that act. There are things that you can consider sexy as far as sexual pictures with nudity and things like that. But then when you think about love, it's more of the romantic side of the romantic aspect of sex. So for love, when I think about how it's defined, it's not just a feeling that you get, but is an expression of the emotions that you experience within yourself in regards to a particular individual because of things that they have within them. When I say within them, I'm talking about character building types of things that add to who they are as a person and what makes up their identity that attracts you to them. And so when I think of love, and the love that I have for my husband, or the love that I have for my daughter, or love that I have for anyone that I have a close relationship with, there are things within that person that I value, that I want near me. And so I express that through telling them verbally with validation, telling them that I want to be around them, or I value their time. And also by showing them. So hugs, kisses with my husband, sex, sexual touch, intimacy, things like that. How would you all define sex and love?
So yeah, no, I am with you that sex is broader than just, vaginal intercourse. Definitely includes the others that you mentioned, anal, oral. And so that's broad. I also, sometimes genitals are not even that it's not paired together, meaning that, okay, it's not your penis and my vagina. Maybe you're using your hands, maybe there are toys involved, but all of that is the broad sense of, what sex can be. Love is even, I double down on what you said and want to go even broader, that for me, love is steady, right? Romance can be spotty, but love is steady. And I think romance is an outworking of how we feel toward people. But for me, love is kind and it's patient. It's this set of core values about the way I show up in how I treat you and how I view you. And so that's love in my mind. Maybe it's philosophical, but in my mind, the word that just keeps coming up is steady.
Yeah, so definitely want to add to that and probably agree to a lot of it as well. Sex is a detached term, and it can be as direct as different types of sexual intercourse, or it could just be because I work in marketing, and when you think sex, you think just desire and lust and all of these other words that describe the act and the feeling that sex and sex appeal kind of emotes. So sex is all of those things. It's an action, it's a purpose, it's a pleasure. However, love on the other side of things is it's kind of a transcendent kind of feeling. Love is all of those you know uh attributes of kindness and joy and happiness that don't necessarily cross paths with sex unless it merges to form intimacy. You know what I mean? And that's where sex kind of plays into love, the intimate, or the more intimate encounter, is when sex kind of plays into love. But yeah, love is kind of a hard to explain, but it brings about vulnerability, and it brings about an openness, and it brings about kind of like an unspokenness. You know what I mean? So one is easier to define, the other isn't, but both, you definitely know when you're in both, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting too how, when you both define love on this greater plane, you share about the openness that you experience within love and with the vulnerability that's there, then it demonstrates then that lies cannot coexist in a loving relationship. And I'm not talking about the white lie to cover up that you're purchasing a gift or a party to do on your partner's behalf or whatever. I'm talking about full on lie, making a choice to lie to them about something, with whatever rationale that you have in place for why you do so. But let's take it back a little bit. I was doing some reading. We were talking about, I was talking about sex with a friend, and I was doing some reading about sex. And a sexologist, Shamra Howard, she mentioned that a normal sexual frequency is determined by what the couple agrees is mutually satisfying. So I think when we think about like relationships, I think oftentimes there's this idea that if you're in a loving marriage and you're having sex every day, because this is just, what you want to do, or this is the way for you to demonstrate love. But the reality is that couples can be happy and have a very healthy sexual relationship, even if they're just having sex once a month. It's really just dependent on what the couple feels is the best frequency for them. Now, granted, I need more than once a month. That's just the way that I roll. But I feel like other people have different things that help them gauge and determine how frequent they want to have sex. Sometimes you also have couples who travel. If a partner is working for business, they're out of town, it's not even physically possible for you to have sex. But I feel like sometimes too, sex and the lack of it, the frequency of sex can be a determinant of the quality and the value in that relationship. Do you guys have anything to add when it comes to frequency of sex? You don't have to tell me about your specific relationship, but just openly what you think about sex and the role that it plays in a relationship.
Child, when you said every day, I was like 21 to like 22 years old, not at 43. Not with kids.
Not with kids.
Ooh, child, is rough. But I agree 100% that it should be determined between the two of you. I think the rubber meets the road when sexual drives don't line up.
Yes.
I think that's where the rubber meets the road for a lot of couples, where one partner's libido is, a little more active than the other, and they're wanting more, and the other just is not. And I agree, it isn't a determinant of how I love you or how much I love you. Sometimes libido can be affected by physiology and medication and mental health challenges, and there are so many different things that can impact one's libido. So, but I think that's where the rubber meets the road. I think it is absolutely crucial for us to decide together. But then I also want to just throw out there that even if we have ideas, it doesn't always line up with, what the other wants to do.
Yeah, I think I agree. Go ahead.
I would generally agree to that as well. I've been married 7 going on 8 years. And I think maybe earlier on in my marriage, I probably would have said, oh no, they definitely equate. And if you're not, engaging in sex often, and it's saying something. But as I've kind of grown and understood and gone through different stages of marriage, and still fairly young marriage, just going on 8 years, but enough time to kind of, experience different waves. It doesn't necessarily determine the level of love, but it is a challenge. You know what I mean? When you deal with, just a headbutting of sexual desire or sexual prowess or whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? Or low sex drive versus high sex drive. Between my own experiences or talking with friends and things of that nature, it's one of the hot topics,
Yeah.
So, for some people, like I said, if I was if I was to be impatient and be 1 to 2 years into marriage, it probably, somebody like in my mind state would have ended a marriage based off of it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
as you go forward and you kind of learn even yourself and things of that nature, and how things get in the way and kids and work and stuff gets in the way, you then have to compromise and understand that, but it definitely plays, it's definitely a challenge, I would say.
Yeah, the other thing is that this the sex therapy field and model has evolved over the years, and one of the places that it's landed is that as a therapist, when you're conducting sex therapy, you are not to make the assumption that because there is something wonky about the couple's sex life, then that means there's something wonky about their emotional intimacy, right?
Right.
Or that you are not to assume that if you fix or if you do the work with their emotional intimacy, then the sexual issues will just dissolve because their emotional intimacy has increased. That, sex and what is happening there is can often very much be something on its own that needs to be dealt with. So that just, further doubles down on the idea that it's not the thing that determines how much I love you or whether or not I love you.
Right.
Sex life, right? It can be a beast on its own, and it can be impacted by several different things.
Right.
I like the point that you made too about Shari, when you spoke about how not because you're having a healthy because you're not having a healthy sexual life means that the emotional health of the relationship is in disrepair as well. I think it's important for us to be able to, and that's why I kind of made sure that I separated the terms, because there's sex, there's love, and then there's lies, right? Because and the role that lies plays when you think about sex and love. The reality is that you can have both things be wonky, you can have both things be great, but sometimes you just want more, you desire more. And then the word that you brought up, the intimacy piece, you can have intimacy without there being any sex at all. And I think a lot of people expect that the way to have intimacy in a marriage or in your relationship is by having sex. And those are not, that having sex, that physical connection, it's great, but that's sexual intimacy. That's a term, in and of itself. But there's still physical intimacy, which doesn't necessarily have to be sex. It could be touching, it could be caressing, it could be a hug, it could be kissing, things like that. But when you think about just intimacy by itself, it's that connection that you feel, towards your partner. It's something that it's almost difficult to define it, because it's either you have it or you don't have it, right? Is this chemistry, je ne sais quoi type of thing that you experience, where sometimes I know for my partner and sometimes I could look at him, he might do something and I look at him and he look at me and we bust out laughing because we kind of connect and we can find jokes in anything that we're doing. But because we have that connection, we don't have to explain whatever it is that we've experienced together. It's just something that just happens. And I feel like when people in relationships are connected, you can experience that intimacy, whether you're having sex or not. So I really appreciate that opinion that you put in there, Shari. And then for you too, Jamar, you were talking about the way that people view sex differently. And I had this conversation, and y'all are going to be like, where is she taking this conversation? But I just want you to bear with me. When people masturbate, I know masturbation can fall under like the sex category. Jim, I need you on your forehead and your eyes. Keep it cute, because
I'm cool. I'm engaged.
he's like, what this wasn't in the script. But
it's all good.
The reason why I brought it up is because, I still a lot of couples, and there are a lot of intimacy issues that come up. right? And one of the issues, and I've been going back and forth with this, when it comes to masturbation and that being a sex thing, when you engage in masturbation, or when your partner engages in masturbation, how, if you are unaware that your partner is engaging in masturbation, or if your partner is unaware that you're engaging in masturbation, would you consider it to be a lie? And then also, would you consider masturbation to be sexual? I would. I consider masturbation to be sexual, but apparently that's not the consensus in the streets. Some people consider masturbation to be a release, just a release, not a sexual release, just a release for anxiety. I know the confusion.
Oh, okay. Do me a favor. Ask the first question again for me.
So the
Make
first
sure I
part
understand.
is, so masturbation, would you consider it to be a lie if one of the partners is unaware that another partner is engaged in it or has done it?
Okay, so I think first we could define lie.
Okay.
I only say that because my definition of a lie is telling me an untruth, leaving out an important detail with the intent to mislead. Right? Omission of the truth, just not telling it, but with the intent to mislead, not because you forgot to mention it, but that leaving this detail out is going to mislead me, and I'm going to be off the scent then. And then the last one is speaking in ways that intends to mislead. All of that is a lie for me. That's why I said maybe we need to define lies. So
I appreciate your definition.
with that said, if a partner is masturbating and is leaving that detail out for any particular reason with the intent to deceive, then it's a lie. If they're just masturbating and they don't think it's something that was important to say, and they don't think it's an issue, and they're not really thinking about it, then I don't consider it a lie. So that's where I land on that.
Okay.
I think you have to look at it a little differently because of the act of masturbation. It's a self, it's a mono act. Like it's between you and you. And I don't feel as though you need to necessarily get any sort of permission to perform that act, unless there is some sort of parameter established in the beginning that, and I that just feels, that seems weird that, if somebody basically had hard feelings against their partner masturbating. However, the best way to equate it would be like if a couple was dieting and he or she like ate some cookies and didn't tell about it. Like, okay, what's the basis here? We're dieting together, so we're going to keep each other on track. Because if that dieting basis isn't there, it's like what I eat is what I eat. Like I don't have to tell you what I eat. So then it's like I don't have to tell you. I don't have to tell you that I, rub one out, like, something like that. I was trying to look for a softer term for it, but I don't have to tell you that I did that. I've been doing that since I was a teenager. You know what I mean? That kind of deal. And it's like that almost seems a little bit like suffocating. However, I can understand how like a spouse might get jealous of the other masturbating because they might feel threatened that, I can do these things for you. I can give you that release, and they might feel threatened or offended. But I don't think that it falls in any category of a lie when it's something that's like an internal act. You know what I mean? So it's like, my thoughts are going to be my thoughts, and I don't necessarily have to share all of my thoughts. I only need to share what is going to impact you. You know what I mean?
I
And
see what you're saying.
you know,
Yeah.
so yeah. So I just look at it like that. Like it's so internal. It's such an internal thing. It's like if I meditate, I feel good off of that. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, do I have to tell you when I meditate? You know, like I gotta feel like,
Yeah.
you
And I
know, like,
definitely agree with you, which is why I said, which is why that distinction for me is, if you're masturbating and that's just what you do, and you're like, well, I don't need to tell my partner that, then no, you're not lying. You just living, right?
right.
But if it's like, hey, I know she don't like when I masturbate,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do
Right.
it, but I'm not gonna tell her.
That part.
That's
Right.
when now we got a problem, because you are literally keeping something from me
Mhm.
with the intent to deceive me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And going back to the cookie thing, right? If a couple comes upon a situation where masturbation becomes a problem for whatever reason, and you're doing it and not or she's doing it and not telling her partner, yeah, that's problematic, because
Yeah.
there's a problem that exists here, right? Even if it's his problem, there's a problem that exists with between the couple, and they've talked about it and they've dialogued, and now something is happening in that space, and one partner is completely unaware of it.
I get that.
And the other partner is like, well, I'm not telling him because he actually has a problem with it, so I'm not telling him. I'm just going to be doing it. So
Right.
I totally agree with what you're saying. Like, if I'm just regularly eating cookies on a regular day, that's not news. But if we were doing something together where we
Then
were
it's
supposed to have cookies, then that is
then
news.
you violating that, you know, that commitment.
Right. So it's so again, then it goes back to the rules and the regulations that each couple creates in the relationship that helps with creating the roadmap for the expectations to come, which makes sense. Because if I say to my husband, I don't have an issue with you masturbating, but I noticed that when you masturbate, then we don't have sex that often. So I would prefer you to just not masturbate so that we could have actual like vaginal, intercourse or whatever. And then I find out, or, that you masturbated and then I ask you about it and you lied to me or something like that. That's an
Yeah.
issue. That's an
Yeah.
issue. It breaks the trust. It breaks your ability to trust the person moving forward. It impacts the love and the intimacy already shared in the relationship. And that
Mhm.
vulnerability that you spoke about, Jamar, it lessens. Why am I going to be vulnerable with you in a relationship if you've demonstrated to me that you're going to be lying? Maybe the first time, maybe it wouldn't just be broken off of one time, but 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Now, this is a pattern. This is a pattern of behavior. This is a part of who you are. It's an issue because it's like, it doesn't matter what stipulations we set for the relationship, you're going to break it anyway. So it's a pattern in that you are unable to be loyal to whatever parameters we've set for our relationship, at least in this time period. And again, it's an indication too that, or it's not an indication that parameters can't shift or change over time. Within your marriage or within your relationship, there are seasons. There are different things, that's going to be okay for this season, but then the next season, we're not doing any of that anymore. We're moving on to something else. And I think that's the important part of a relationship too, because without the communication and your ability to make sure that you are setting those guidelines and expectations in the relationship, things that will just fall apart. You have to have that communication. And I feel like communication is one of the foundational things in any relationship, So for me, it's a lie. Like if I tell you, no, I don't want you doing something, or if I say I don't care, then I don't care. If I legitimately say I don't care about something, I do not care, and I don't want my partner to be ashamed for anything that they may be doing or whatever the case is. But if you're hiding it,
Right.
no, that's where I'm not in the business of the whole lying situation. I don't care if you lying to save face. I don't care if you lying because you thought that, you didn't want to make me upset. What's going to make me upset is to find out that you're engaging in something that we've already discussed were off limits or not, acceptable within the relationship, and you decide to go against that and do it anyway.
Right. No, I feel that. I can see how, like I even mentioned, someone could feel wronged by that happening, but it just has that layer of, you got to have the understanding of what it means to each other before you go and do it,
Yeah, agreed. And to the second question, as far as masturbation being a release, I know oftentimes when I have this is bad to admit, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Oftentimes when I have clients who complain about their supervisor and the way that their supervisor may manage them or their behavior, I always ask, are they in a relationship? I always ask that. And oftentimes the answer is no, or that they are in one and they're visibly unhappy.
So
Because
they're projecting.
because masturbation or sex, it helps with releasing endorphins into the system. It helps to make you feel good physiologically. I'm not saying that sex is going to cure COVID. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm just saying that sex helps with alleviating some anxiety or frustration that might be built up, internally. And so it helps. But would you all consider masturbation to be just a regular release? Or would you feel like it still kind of fits or falls under the category of sex or some type of sexual act?
So I want to just go back to when I kind of said how it originated. Like, it's like for a lot of people, not for everybody, but it kind of comes internally as you understand your own body. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So of course you lean on it much less when you have someone else that you can pair with. But yes, the short answer is yes, it is a release. It's a release before you actually find like true intimacy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's more in line with the scientific release of things, unless you pair it with like a visual aid, like porn or something like that. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking like I'm not like part of the Masturbation Advocate Association of America. I'm just saying, like, I think that's why a high percentage of people do it, is for that release if they're frustrated. And then you get other people who are too far gone on the spectrum, maybe addicted to like porn or and it's like that's just the what you play into it with, you know what I mean? But in most cases, it is for that form of release. It probably is saying, that's why I said like a spouse might get mad and say, well, I can do that for you, because it plays into, alleviating each other, or did you have to alleviate yourself, Mm-hmm. And it's an alleviation. That's all it really, really is.
Terrence, you jumping in?
Terrence, you got something to say.
Yeah, I think I think the conversation is kind of beating around what I consider to be a point that we don't often talk about in relationships, which is feelings of ownership about the other person, right? So what you're talking about here is, right, why do you feel the need to do that? Like, I own your sexuality. That should be with me. And I'm not, really here to say whether that is or isn't right for a relationship. I think all these things vary based on the people involved. But I think oftentimes we don't communicate those things. So one thing that I remember from one of the relationship counseling sessions I went through was the counselor was basically saying that in marriage, your sexuality belongs to your spouse. And I was like, I don't necessarily believe that, right? So if you have different perspectives on who owns the other sexuality, right, then things like masturbation can become a much bigger problem. And again, as was pointed out before, if your indulgence in masturbation is affecting our intimacy, that's a whole different issue. But if it's not affecting our intimacy, then maybe the problem lies somewhere else, right? So it's often not as simple as one thing or the other. And then also I wanted to say, like, there's also whenever you involve someone else in something, no matter how you feel about them and how their involvement can elevate a situation, it can also detract from a situation, right? So if you as a person psychologically look at it, I mean, I think it's hard to argue that it's not a sexual release. Like physically, chemically, it's a sexual release, right? But if you look at it as, I need to get to the product of this release, the endorphins in my body, then sometimes adding someone else can complicate that, right? So again, not here to justify the behavior, but saying as someone from the outside who's saying, well, why do you feel the need to do that without me? Just adding another variable into the situation complicates it, right? Now, sex with you may be better, but it may also be more complicated. And sex with someone doesn't always lead to a release, right? And
True.
And that doesn't mean the sex isn't healthy, right? But like sometimes I just need a release. So that's what I do, right? But again, it falls back to communication and the understanding that relationships aren't about where you want to grow or how you see things for yourself or for the other person. It's about understanding where both of you are growing together and the sacrifices that you both need to get there. So somewhere in the middle of, you going off and satisfying yourself and your spouse wanting to only do it with them, there is a happy ground, but you have to be willing to talk about it to reach that happy ground. If you're unwilling to talk about it, if you either shut them down by saying, it's my body, I can do what I want, or they shut you down by saying, you should be doing this with me, don't go off in the corner and do it, then I think that really is an unhealthy behavior. Whereas maybe you can work through the masturbation, but the unwillingness to compromise really takes it from something that can be solved to something that can't be solved.
So all of that part, I was so right there with you in that this idea of, I make you climax. You don't make me climax. We're here together. We're in the experience together, right? Because think about it. If you make me climax, what happens when I don't?
Right.
You failed. Right?
Yeah.
And now
yes.
all kind of shame and all kind of stuff is coming up. No. I don't make you, you don't make me. We're in this experience together. We're enjoying one another. We're exploring one another. And so I'm totally with you on that each person gets to own their sexuality. And masturbation is a really great way to do that. It's a really great way to explore and understand, like Jamar said, your body and yourself. Do I believe it is a sexual act? Yes, because there is a climax. There are genitals involved. Like this is not an exhale release. This is not a release of any kind, but a sexual release. So for me, it is a sexual act, and yes, it does include a release. But so does vaginal sex, and so does oral sex, and so can anal sex. All of that can, be a release. So I don't think that just because you're by yourself that now changes it from being a sexual act. The last thing I want to say, which is off topic, but it's burning it's burning on my chest, is the way we are socialized is super duper important, I think, for what we think about masturbation and for why we lie about it when we do.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
True.
That's a whole other topic that is going to be coming up down, because I wanted that then leads into like Christian beliefs or Christian thoughts and how that impacts sex and how it impacts the relationship. And that's a whole, Shari, I'm right there with you. That's a good comment, girl. Good comment. And so I can't remember who it was. Oh, I raised my hand, Jamar, when you spoke, because when you said, when you're masturbating and you incorporate porn with it, you were saying you were saying that that's when it's a sexual release and otherwise it's not?
No, I was saying that's when it becomes more sexualized. Because I was just saying, yes, it's a release, but it becomes more sexualized. It then plays, I think that's when it becomes more of a violation and it could become a lie and things of that nature, because that's an indulgence that pairs a visual, and that's slippery slope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know too many people who can get it done without visuals. However, you know, it's probably safer to not just, okay, there's a new unspoken understanding, like meme. You guys ever seen the meme where it's like, the color of Pornhub's branding, so the bottom of the page where you're like on page 300, like people keep scrolling. You have to look at, Terrence is nodding, you know what I mean?
I seen the meme.
Yeah, you seen the meme.
I haven't seen
And
it.
a lot of people relate to that because that's when masturbation takes a turn. And it's like your psyche is starting to be transformed. And if all you need is a visual of sex, why are you 300 pages deep looking for that right page? See, that's going to alter your psyche. You know what I mean? And that's going to transform, what definitely turns you on versus, I'm trying to grasp what the term is, but I can't recall it right now.
It
But
begins to desensitize you.
that's it. Yeah. It desensitizes you, and that's when it becomes very problematic. I know women who can masturbate in a few seconds by themselves, that kind of deal. And guys, we really, really tend to lean on like the visual stuff because it's kind of like in the age old, boy being a boy with the Playboy magazines and stuff like that.
However, truth be told, men are much more visual.
That's our socialization.
Yeah. Men are much more visual than women. Women are generally stimulated by what we are hearing, and men are generally stimulated by what they are seeing. So
and that's when it really, really, harbors into, a dark territory. And that's when it'd be like, oh, that's a lie, because it's usually like a whole treasure chest of crazy stuff that comes out, like, well, what is all this? What is all this on the computer? And what is all this? And it could feel like a lie. But if it's just like, the act of it, and that isn't as present, then, I'm going back to the first question, but yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting that you mentioned that. And there was something that I read so it was talking about the average number of times per week that married couples, like how much they make love and things like that. But when you made your comment about like the desensitization part, right? I thought about, okay, so if you're desensitized, or if you're feeling desensitized, then how do you then tell your partner, like if you see that your partner is becoming desensitized to certain things, how do you communicate to your partner then? Okay, I see that this is an issue for you. I see what happens to you when you're engaging in these behaviors or these acts. So I wanted to let you know that this is becoming a problem. How do you communicate to your partner that issue?
So you're saying if I'm the one who's desensitized, how do I then tell my partner?
If your wife realizes, okay, Jamar, he's desensitized, he's seen these things, how can I communicate to him that this is a problem so that it's not impacting our marriage anymore, and then also just not impacting you?
Well, I think when the communication lines are pretty open, then that is confronted, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but that's like brought up pretty quick. Like, what's up with you? What's going on? What's going on? Why isn't this working? Why isn't that working? And then if it's a communication good flow, then it's like, what it could be. I'm watching a lot of porn lately, and I think that's playing tricks, because going through 8 years of marriage, I'll get candid for the first time. That's happened, in my marriage, so you have to then say, okay, I need to ease up off of that. And you can, your sensitivities can return. And I think that's a conversation that's being had and shared and alluded to in a lot of media now, because of just the the open access of like porn and things of that nature.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so now it's like, hey, you might want to not watch that as much, so because it'll play a part, so, and then now the people are profiting on, hoping that people don't correct that, because they'll treat ED and stuff like that. But, so, but no, it's definitely, it lies in the communication. It sits in the communication. If a wife is feeling like, hey, something's off, she should say something. And then the husband should be very transparent and at least pinpoint different things that he's experiencing sexually to try to troubleshoot it, and vice versa.
And I
So
think
you're
that's
saying
the
that it's
key.
important for it to be communicated out, and
Mhm.
because you're married and you have that closeness of the relationship, you should feel comfortable being able to share that with your partner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that I always encourage my couples to lead with what you are feeling
Mhm.
as opposed to what this other person is doing,
Yeah.
right? I am feeling neglected. I am feeling, a little insecure about my ability to, that about how pleasurable you find our experiences as a result, I think, of all the porn that you're engaging in. This is what's happening on my end. This is what I am feeling.
Mhm.
And then also, I am very much, I think a lot of times we are socialized to deal with the symptom as opposed to what is actually going on the inside.
Mhm.
So if I were if my partner were engaging and I thought I saw desensitization, I'd be wanting to have conversations about what bucket porn is filling up for my partner so that we can talk a little bit about the frequency and why, like what is actually happening with my partner, not the thing that he is doing, but what is the motivation, what is the payoff, what is happening with my
Mhm.
actual partner. So those are the two things I would say: lead with your emotions and what you are experiencing, and then try to deal with not the symptom, but the actual thing that is happening.
That's super clutch. That's assertive communication, right? Because when you assert yourself by telling whomever it is what it is that you're feeling, it detracts from the behavior, like you were saying. So it's not like you're watching porn and you're this, is I'm feeling neglected, when you watch porn, or I feel like I can't measure up to these women, which makes me feel like
Shame.
I'm not
Yeah.
as pretty, or I'm not as beautiful, and I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. And that's how I feel. And then your partner is more likely to respond to you like, oh, that's not how, I wasn't trying to make you feel like that. And you get a different response from your partner when you use assertive communication, especially when it comes to like sex and that kind of, that those types of conversations, because the person would feel like they're not being confronted about something that they're doing that's bad, that makes them a bad person. No one wants to be the bad person, So I think it's really important, the communication skills that we learn and we use in our relationships.
And if we're talking about lies, there's almost always shame present.
Yep.
Right? Because shame causes us to hide. And
Mhm.
so we don't want to confront and make our partner feel even more shameful, right? We want to be very kind in the way we bring these things up.
Right. Tone, it's all about tone, and I always, say to a lot of my clients, when you want to have certain conversations, don't text. Don't text the conversation. Wait until you can see the person face to face, because you can't really tell tone through text. So unless you plan on using a whole bunch of emojis or something like that, which I still wouldn't recommend, the person may still turn around and get a completely different idea from what it is that you're trying to convey and walk away not fully understanding what your concerns and feelings are. So, yeah. Okay, so I know we have like 5 more minutes. So I'm trying to see what we can talk about. I know we're gonna have to add some more time to this conversation next week, which is great. But I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about like some ways that you might receive or some ways that you feel might be important when it comes to repairing distrust so that you can increase intimacy. I know we mentioned being open, we spoke about being vulnerable. What are some other things that you guys would like to add when it comes to repairing distrust and increasing intimacy?
I just think more transparency. I think like, inviting a spouse into your, regular activity, or sharing something that you enjoy that maybe you didn't share ahead of that time, and maybe finding a new, a new embrace and togetherness in a new activity. You kind of have to build a new bridge of, kinship in order to repair something that you might have damaged.
Right. That's a good one. So like life interests, goals, and things like that. I always recommend to my clients when they're having issues in their relationship, if they're working towards a goal together, so relationship goals, that helps them with feeling like they're doing something together, and it helps repair a lot of that distrust that can occur in the relationship. It's a good one.
So yeah, I want to double down on transparency. Sometimes that, and you talked about relationships going through seasons. The more and more I sit with couples that have dealt with infidelity, the more I come to understand that when we're rebuilding trust, there have to be some practices that are bridge practices that help the partner who has been cheated on to feel safer and safer as time goes on, but they are not permanent practices. So that may mean, hey, and these are things you talk about collaboratively, right? So sometimes that means, hey, whenever I ask to see your phone, I just need you to hand it over. And the partner says, okay. But that's not something we're going to be doing for the next 20 years.
Right.
That is a bridge practice
Mm-hmm.
to help the partner come to a sense of safety in the relationship. So that's one thing, creating collaboratively some practices that will help foster that trust. And oftentimes that is big transparency, like bigger than you've ever experienced before, because when have I ever handed my phone over? When did I ever like have my location discoverable on our phones? Like that's not something we ever felt we needed to do before, but now, that may be something we agree upon. So some short-term practices as well, it's kind of along the lines of what you guys just shared. It's like creating a map for our relationship, building, future goals and things where we are now mapping out what our life is going to look like as we move forward together. That is also helpful because in those types of conversations, you get to hear the hopes and the dreams and things that are intimate, that bond you together. You get to engage with that together. So those are the two things. I know we're running out of time. So those are two things that come up immediately.
I like those.
I just wanted to add real quick, I think my perspective tends to be a bit different from other people. I approach this problem differently. I don't believe that distrust can be repaired by anything that you do as the person who broke the trust. Trust is inherently something that is granted, not earned. So what I can do as someone who has broken a trust is I can understand, what is important to you, what I did that broke the trust. I can show that I'm making an effort to understand that. And I think also importantly, I can work towards, again, re-emphasizing the things that are important about the relationship that matter, whether those things be related to the trust or not, right? So reprioritizing and re-showing, this is what our relationship is about. This is why we're together. This is why we love each other. And this is the trust that we have. Whether the thing that broke the trust or not, whether the thing that broke the trust is within the realm of those things or without it, I think that there is a conversation that needs to happen. And sometimes you need to reprioritize and say, do we agree on this? And honesty is key. Sometimes people change, like, hey, maybe I want women on the side now, and I think admitting that to your spouse and then working through what that means and growing from that admission is more likely to bring the spouse to a place of, okay, well, I understand and we've agreed, and I feel like I can, take a chance and offer this trust again, as opposed to pretending to be something you're not or avoiding the topic. So I just feel like you need to be very transparent. You need to be very open, because again, you can pretend, but that trust is always something that they have to grant, and people can pick up on things, right? So that transparency really communicates sincerity.
Agreed. Those are some good points. I like the way you always have a different twist on everything, Court. And then to add to what you all have shared with the transparency, I think it's important sometimes just to schedule sex. If you're not having enough intimacy, I know Shari and I, we were talking about kids getting in the way sometimes. I know my daughter comes to bed, to our bed around 2 o'clock every night. She just swing open the door, she come on in.
My son is just like that. My son is just like that.
So it's, if you're trying to have sex, you need to do it before, at least for us, we got to do it before 2 p.m., 2 a.m., or wait till she goes back to sleep and then, go to the next room, go to her bed or whatever the case is. It's a mess, but sometimes you have to schedule sex just so you can make sure you fit it in. And also just for helping just to reconnecting to your partner as needed, and making sure that you're meeting one another's sexual needs. When Shari spoke about sexual needs and desires being different for each partner, even if I may not be interested in having sex, my partner, he might be, and he might be needing some, and I'm like, okay, but a part of a marriage is there being ebbs and flows, right? And I want to be able to meet his needs, because I wouldn't want him to be like, oh, well, you weren't meeting my needs, I'm gonna go ahead and get my need met elsewhere. We're not doing that. And the other thing is just to practice like touching, sexual touch, or having intimate dates and sessions like that. Also, if you need to connect to a sex therapist, that's an option. I'm sure I'm not a licensed sex therapist. I would not say that I have those skills. However, they do exist, and if you're interested, that's another option for you to go, that another path to go down. So sometimes people have a relationship therapist or a couples therapist, they have an individual therapist, and then they have a sex therapist. If you need whatever it is that you need, there's support out there for you. So just make sure that you tap into whatever those resources are. And if you need anything directly, of course, you can always reach out to me as a licensed therapist, and Shari, she's a licensed therapist as well. And if you have any other needs, anyone in the chat, I'm sure if you want to connect with anyone, just let me know, and I can, be sure to try to send that info to you for like launch arts, media, or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Any last words? Everybody's good?
Great conversation.
Cool. Thank everybody. I just want to thank everyone for coming out and for participating. I know this is the worst time of the day on a Monday, especially for people to participate. So I'm just thankful for y'all for showing up and showing out, being a part of this discussion. This is going to be awesome. And Evelyn, I do not have a podcast. Sherry does, but I do post videos and conversations like these on my YouTube channel, which is Counseling Conversations. So I think that's the link. If it's not, when I double check, I'm going to go back and see if I can get in contact with you from your registration and send you the correct information.
And yeah, if you're interested in Black Girl Love Well, we are on Spotify. We are on Google, we're on iHeart, we're on a bunch of the platforms, and then as well on my website, lovewellfamilytherapy.com.
lovewellfamilytherapy.com.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. I don't know why I put capital D in there for your name, Shari, but all right. Thank you all and have a good day. Bye.